God has revealed to me, like when I don't delegate and I try to do things myself, it just does not succeed. And as soon as I delegate it and hand it off and spend time training people, like, oh my goodness, like it grows tenfold.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 346 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you've joined us. And if this is your first time listening to this particular podcast, glad you found us. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're back. And I'm really happy that you're with me on this journey and hope that you're going to get a lot out of this episode. You know, one of the things that I've said over and over again on this podcast is, and one of the reasons I love podcasting as much as I do, is that I really get to meet some really wonderful people and get to have conversations with them. And I've literally met people from all over the world just through this medium and just what it brings. And in this particular episode, this is no exception to that thought frame or that way of thinking of things. I got the pleasure of interviewing Aaron Mallory. And once I met Aaron, I just thought to myself, this guy is the real deal. And in the short time that I got to talk with Aaron, I really came away from that conversation just truly impressed with him and the work that he's doing. Aaron is the person behind the Grow community, which is based in Chicago, and he tells his story here. And I think you'll find very quickly that this guy, as I said earlier, is the real deal. And he is making such an impact in the world. I know just from what I learned from him and just some really great stuff. And just not only from just a humanitarian or just an advocacy standpoint, Aaron is quite the entrepreneur, and I think you can learn so much from him, and particularly just the work that he's doing in the South Side of Chicago, and also just things that he has learned about being in practice and starting a nonprofit. And I'm going to mention his website here at the beginning. I don't usually do that, but if you'll go to growcommunity.org, I think when you look at the website, you'll be able to see pretty quickly that he's making a huge difference in the world and just in the community. And so I'm really looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Aaron. I'd love for you to go check out mentalhealthwaretn.com. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know I've been helping a good friend of mine, Ashley, in developing her online store that sells T-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies and all that sort of thing that are focused on the mental health space and the mental health professional space. So be sure to check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. You'll find links here in the show notes and the show summary. But she's got some really cute and neat Halloween items that she's getting out there. And also with September being the Suicide Awareness Month, she's got some items that are specific to that. If you want to get some great swag around those things, she's got some, as I mentioned, Halloween items as well that are geared towards our profession. So I think you'll like some of the designs that she's come up with. So check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. therapynotes.com, and you can get a 20% discount on your first order just by using the discount code TAKE2024. So be sure and check that out. And again, you'll find links here in the show notes and the show summary. And also, real quickly, before we get to my conversation with Aaron, love for you to hear from our sponsors of the podcast, along with a word from one of the members of the Psychcraft Network. You know, when starting a private practice as a therapist, counselor, or a life coach, things can feel a bit overwhelming. You're unsure where to start, what to focus on, or how to grow things. I've been in private practice now for over 18 years, and a lot has changed. I've helped countless clinicians avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and build successful practices that align with their values and lifestyle. My coaching and consulting services are all about giving you a focused plan, helping you set clear priorities, and understand exactly where to invest your time, energy, and money. We'll work on defining your niche and then how to market it, ensuring that you build a practice that's both impactful and enjoyable. I'll also teach you the business skills they don't cover in grad school, from financial planning to implementing systems that make your practice run smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. In addition, I can help you find ways to diversify your income streams and create financial stability for long-term growth. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your practice to the next level, I'm here to guide you in every step of the way. Let's work together to turn your vision into a thriving, fulfilling reality. To apply and find out more, just go to practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. That's practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. And also you can book a free 15-minute discovery call with me to talk about your goals and vision. I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey there, Daniel Fava here, and if you don't know me, I'm the host of the Private Practice Elevation podcast, where I share online marketing strategies and interviews to help private practice owners attract more clients and scale their businesses. The Private Practice Elevation podcast is part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts, and I'm super excited to be a part of this network alongside Gordon and the great work he's doing. If you haven't discovered the Private Practice Elevation podcast yet, you can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love for you to join me as we explore topics like building an effective website for your private practice, search engine optimization, content marketing, and copywriting, as well as my conversations with experienced private practice owners about scaling a practice, outsourcing, team leadership, and all things that will help you elevate your business and create the life you love. Be sure to check us out at privatepracticeelevation.com for resources and content to help you in your online marketing journey.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really excited for you to get to meet Aaron Mallory. And Aaron and I have just, as I do with everyone on the podcast, we've just been chatting a little bit here ahead of time. And I can already tell you're going to get some really good vibes with Aaron. And I'm really excited for him to be a guest. So welcome, Aaron, to the podcast.
Man, thanks for having me.
Yes. So, Aaron, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and your story and your journey and how you've landed where you've landed?
Yeah. So I guess I could kind of start off where undergrad, honestly. So I got my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. And during my senior year, like my junior year, I started like mentoring kids. And I started also like working with incoming students in the College of Engineering and particularly minority students and really just started helping them like kind of understanding how to do the calculus. And, a lot of students kind of would fall off because of the challenges with math. And, I started seeing the success of my students by just mentoring them and guiding them. And then I started working with like a trio up around programs, mentoring kids. And man, I had some pretty cool internships, but like when I graduated, I recognized that engineering was more of a job and not my passion, and I really wanted to go home and mentor kids. And, I was from Chicago, wanted to go back into the inner city of Chicago and really like encourage kids to go to college at that time and do workshops. And so I remember moving back home with my mom, and my mom had this look on my face of like, on her face, like, yo, you got an engineering degree, you're moving in with me, and you want to mentor kids. Like, she just frustrated, I think, because like, she helped me get through college and all that. But, like, wow, mom, I really, I just want to make a difference. And so, I started going to these different schools doing workshops and presentations. And one day, this lady
Oh,
was
we
like,
froze up.
at one of the schools I was doing work, she said, you should go to school for social work. And I said, social work? She said, yeah. I didn't know much about social work except, people often say social workers don't make money. Like that was like the preface of a lot of it. But I didn't know. But I started like researching what social work really was and started, started seeing like a lot of organizations that, had EDs, that had an MSW behind their name. And so I said, okay. So I went and got my master's, went to University of Chicago, and I learned a lot of good information while I was there. And one of the things we did a case study was on a community mental health center that was on the far south side of Chicago that was open to really provide mental services for the African American community at a time when, those services didn't exist. And we learned, we did a case study on how they use fee-for-service, Medicaid, and things like that. And so I was intrigued, like, hey, this could be something. And so when I graduated, I worked at that agency. It was a community mental health center. Learned a lot, but, to those that worked at community mental health center, they don't pay much and they work you really hard. And so during that time, though, I learned a lot about how Medicaid works, how billing works, became a supervisor, learned different, clinical intervention modalities. So I really sharpened my toolbox. But, I think one of the things that it did for me was that I would have a caseload of clients, and I was the only African American male on my team. So I would have a caseload full of African American boys, and I would go into these houses, and I would be like the only positive male going in the house. Oftentimes, fathers went in the household. I'll go to the school. Not a lot of male figures in the school systems, and so moms would reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you work with my other son? Or I got a nephew that I just think if you could work with him, just having that connection and being able to build that therapeutic rapport." And so the idea hit me like, hey, I should build a business, a practice around providing practitioners that are of color, particularly African American males, for African American boys who, it was just a need for. And so the idea started kind of ruminating and my mind started thinking about it a lot, started kind of doing the initial paperwork. And I knew that I really wanted to work with the Medicaid population. And oftentimes, my colleagues kind of shied away from the Medicaid population, right? Like, when you go to private practice, you want to get PPO insurance, the Blue Crosses, and I knew like the population I feel I was called to work with, they don't have PPO, they have Medicaid. So I knew I had to figure out kind of how that works so I could serve that group. And so I left that job and I went to another job and kind of did more of like a clinical director over like gun violence work, looking at how do we use clinical interventions to address gun violence within the city of Chicago. Great experience, learned. I became an expert in CBT. It was awesome. But I remember on March 13, 2020, I said, you know what, I'm gonna leave this job and I'm gonna do my practice full time. Now, I don't know if you remember what was going on March 13, 2020, but like this was like at the height of the pandemic, right? So I'm in Illinois, and I remember like that Monday, so they canceled my going away party and we had to do it virtually because of COVID. And then that Monday, I remember our governor, JB Pritzker, shut down the state. And so I'm like, I just quit my job. And I don't know like what's going on. Like I'm like, Aaron, I just quit my job to do something, and I don't even know what's going on with the world right now. And so I remember sitting at home with my daughter, like just kind of salty for about a week. But I'm a very big faith person. I really felt God was calling me to do this. And so I had a small little office, went into my office, and parents started calling like, hey, my son needs to talk to somebody. We'll put a mask on and come. Like he needs to see somebody. And like literally it just started to grow. I started, I knew two other colleagues that were the social workers in the mental health field, reached out to them, asked if they were interested. They were like, yes. And from there, I mean, during the pandemic, we grew. It was like three of us,
Wow.
10 of us. I mean, today, I have a staff over 100, and we're
Wow.
in Chicago, we're in Peoria, Illinois, we're in Carbondale, Illinois, we're in Rockford, opened up in Cincinnati, getting ready to open up in Detroit. And so
Yeah.
we've grown like significantly. And again, we cater to the Medicaid population. And I really like kind of redefine what does it mean to be particularly a community mental health agency, but like an agency that is focused specifically on, billing Medicaid and really also thinking about how we provide quality services to a population that deserves it,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
for me, it's, that's the story, particularly around, kind of how I got the practice going. I'll tell
Wow.
you the bumps and bruises along the way, but that's
Yeah.
the initial story
Yeah.
of it.
Well, I'm just amazed, particularly for someone to start, at the beginning of the pandemic, number one. I mean, just all those kind of obstacles and things, and the fact that you've grown to the size that you have in really a relatively short period of time. Again, I'd love to pick your brain with how you were able to do that and so quickly. And I guess I guess one question that comes to mind for me, Aaron, is that it sounds like at some point you made a decision: do I want to do maybe for profit versus nonprofit? Or did that even come into consideration along the way?
Yeah, so the idea around a nonprofit was more because of wraparound services. Like the goal was to be able to provide wraparound services as well at a point, and we do now. And so to be able to attract grants, and so we've been able to get
Hmm.
grants. So we have a
Gotcha.
clinical workforce program for our reentry population. So guys that come home, we do half a day of intensive cognitive behavioral therapy. The other half, they work in our screen print facility where they're making T-shirts, but just learning how to, work in a work environment in a group setting. And so we're able to get grants to be able to pay for those guys to get paid for, while they're working in the screen print. And then when they get in the clinical, we build a Medicaid for. We also have housing programs that we provide for our reentry population.
Hmm.
We do different incentives for, we work with a lot of young people that are on probation for gun cases, things in Chicago. And so, we have different incentives. So the grants, being a nonprofit allows us to be able to get different grants to get a support. But
Yeah.
the Medicaid and because we generate a surplus also allows us to be able to have a substantial amount of unrestricted dollars to be able to invest in what we do, right? But I
Hmm.
also am getting creative, and so like our Ohio is credentialed as an LLC, and so that is a for-profit component. And so
Okay.
just I've been bringing on entertaining different attorneys to think about how we can like really think about how we structure it in a unique way so that there's both arms where we have a for-profit and a nonprofit. But
Yeah.
initially kicking off, I knew I wanted to have wraparound services, and so because of that, it was just advantageous to do it as a nonprofit so that you could attract grants to get an offset. And I think one unique thing about us too is that though we're not dependent on grants because of the way we bill our Medicaid and things like that. But the grants are a good supplement to be able to provide additional services. I think
All right.
as we address mental health and we help somebody get at a baseline, but if you don't have the tools to be able to obtain employment or if you don't have housing, mental health is going to continue to struggle, right? And so for us, it's like,
Right.
hey, let's get people at baseline, but let's provide these wraparound to be able to help and support them as well.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm curious too. And when you initially started moving into this, did you ever think it would get to this size?
I got a big ambitious goal. So yeah and no. I didn't think it was gonna be as
Uh,
quick, but
uh-huh.
the goal is to be national and then globally, right? Like I've
Yeah.
always told people, like I don't want to just be in Chicago, Illinois. I want to branch out to other states. I want to figure out how to
Hmm.
do work in other countries, whether that's Haiti, whether that's going to Africa or countries in the
Hmm.
Caribbean, and figure out how to do this work. So I do have a pretty massive vision, Lord willing, that I'll be able to achieve. So
Hmm.
but I do wake up like like man, I can't believe this is what we're doing, and trying to always get better. But it's definitely a blessing. I'll tell you that.
Right, right. Well, it's amazing just to hear this story. And I know one of the things that probably if I were to pick your brain a bunch, one of the things that I'm guessing is one of your superpowers is the ability to delegate and hand off to team members so that you're not doing it all yourself.
Spot on. And I feel like I've learned, like, when I don't, like, I feel like God has revealed to me, like, when I don't delegate and I try to do things myself, it just does not succeed. And as soon as I delegate it and hand it off, and and spend time training people, like, oh my goodness, like it grows tenfold. Like, and so
Right.
I think delegation is so important. And I had to learn it the hard way because, when I first started, I was doing everything. I was doing my billing. I was didn't have any, see clients, do my notes, doing screening calls, doing initial assessments, doing the marketing on social media, and it just was a headache. And then, I started just bringing on people, and I invest. Like, I invest in the business. I'm big on, like, what, maybe, especially in the beginning, I didn't pay myself a lot in the beginning. And if it meant paying other people that may make more money in the beginning, it allows us to grow and build our infrastructure. And so for me,
Right.
even to now, like, we do well, but I invest significantly in updating our data management system. Always look at what's the best EHR system that we should be using. How do we enhance our marketing capabilities to retargeting or different things, right? So I've always just had that. Like, if I invest in people and attract good people around me, and if I got to pay them a little bit more, but I
Mm-hmm.
know that it's going to advance and we can do more volume, then we're going to generate more. We're going to help more people, and then the bottom line organization is going to be better, right?
Right.
But I think that ideal of, oftentimes, that aspect of not trusting people or fear, like you're the only one that can do it. I dealt with those in the beginning. I had to get rid of it quick, because even now, like, I wouldn't be at the level I'm at right now if I didn't delegate, and have a team of
Right.
people. And I think also too, being intentional about training people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we use TrainingWell, and that's where all of our policies and procedures. We have all of our training videos. So when people get on board, they kind of have different quizzes and things they can learn. But just taking time and training people, creating systems where they can go back to and learn the policies and the systems, expectations is so important. But it's yielded so much fruit doing that, significantly.
Yeah. So I'm curious too. You started out an engineering background, moved into social work. Somewhere in there, you've learned the business side of things. How did that come about?
Yeah. No, I would say some of it is reading,
Okay.
but I think too it's just like trial and error, you
Uh-huh.
know. One of my favorite books is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and that's not
Yeah.
per se a book on specific business, but it's a book on just the manifestation
Mm,
of ideas and belief,
yeah.
right?
Mindset.
And
Yeah.
what you can attract around you, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, listen to podcasts on different entrepreneurs talk about how they do their business. At Google, we live in so much information. My
Mm-hmm.
dad was an entrepreneur. So, like,
Okay.
I kind of saw some of those things growing up as well. And so, yeah, and I think one thing about engineering, it makes I'm very analytical. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on step-by-step processes, data, outcomes. Like, my brain is programmed in that way. And so everything we do in the agency, that's how I think. Those are questions. And I think even as a clinician, I kind of, struggle sometimes because that's not the real, as a clinician, we're more of a processing and, understanding and, guiding the client through, not, but what's best for them, right? And so, my
Mm-hmm.
analytical mind would get in the way of those things sometimes. I had to check myself on that. But on the business
Uh-huh.
side, very intentional about kind of how we do things, what we do, knowing what specific questions to ask, and
Yeah.
thinking about, ultimately how we solve problems with this, well.
Right, right. Well, I know the other thing that you've done, Aaron, and because we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, you've kind of pivoted, maybe that's not the right word, but you started a virtual assistant company
Yep.
that, and from what little bit you told me about it, is actually getting folks from Nigeria that
Yep.
are
Yep.
kind of running it. So say more about all of that.
Yeah, so my freedom. So I started off, as I was growing my practice, I knew I needed help, right? And as I was starting, I had an office manager, but she, as we were growing, she needed more help, and I just couldn't afford it, at the time to be to hire somebody else, particularly in the States. And so, I was using a virtual assistant overseas, I think maybe in the Philippines, and they were okay, but it just things weren't getting done the way I needed to. Um, and I figured that if, maybe, if I created my own, a virtual assistant company that, I could, number one, have the source trained and also help other practitioners. I had colleagues and friends that I knew that were were stressed out, overwhelmed. They were, we would have these conversations. They would say, "Yeah, I'm doing everything, I really want to grow. I just don't have the time, and I definitely don't have the money to do it." And so I traveled to Nigeria in 2022. One of my friends was going there for a funeral, And so, he invited me to come with him. I went and I went to different universities across Nigeria, and particularly social work programs. And I landed at Babcock University, met with the social work director there, talked about my vision, and it fell in line too in regards to kind of, trying to create employment opportunities for the students that were graduating. From there, and I think too, also, I was like, hey, I want to do something where I can build economic sustainability, particularly, on the continent of Africa and Nigeria, where, oftentimes jobs are limited, resources are limited. And I say, hey, this could be a good way to make a connection too, where social workers in Africa could be helping practitioners here in America, where now practitioners can grow their business, but at the same time, these social workers now have, employment, they're doing well, they're thriving, able to take care of their families. And so from there, I started using a virtual assistant myself. Start off 1, 2. I mean, right now we use about maybe 15 just for Grow alone, and they do all of our data management, the data tracking, they do our screenings, they do our billing, our ELBs, calling our insurance companies, reconciling claims. I mean, when we got to analyze different data reports, they're going and doing all that back end support for us. I also, like we have created a system where, one of the things I used to hate as a practitioner was that they want us to do so much. Like when I worked at community mental health, we had to do all these assessments, progress notes, documentation, and then you still had to meet a productivity requirement, right? And I used to hate it. And then on top of that, they weren't paying you anything either. So like it was like all these expectations. I used to hate it. And I said, like, when I open my practice, it's gonna be different. So like we create a very basic, simple system where, our clinicians are doing click, click, click. From there, our VAs are transcribing notes, putting into the EHR system. They go in and sign off on it, but it minimized times for practitioners significantly. Same thing with assessments. We created systems where our virtual assistants are coming in, doing the basic stuff. They get the info they need from the clinician. And so it minimizes the time that our clinicians have to do on paperwork so they can be intentional about being in the field and seeing their clients, right? And so, yeah, so it's been something, myfreedomva.com or getfreedomva.com is our website. But it's been something that we've seen it grow, and for me, like it's twofold. Like I said, it's twofold. I want to see practitioners grow their practice, right, and particularly in the African American community where there's always been a stigma around mental health, but now people are starting to see like, hey, there's value to it. But the concern is that there's not enough practitioners to service, particularly African American community, right? 2% of psychologists are African American. I mean, the shortages, particularly African American men, just in the mental health field as a whole. And so my hope is that if I can help practitioners point in and building their practice, and they can recruit talent, and then more families can get the quality mental health services that they need. I mean, I just know so many people who practitioners that say, yeah, I got a wait list because the demand is high. I just I don't have the time to build the infrastructure to build my practice so I can bring on more people, and that disheartens me all the time. And so if my freedom can be that tool, then that's the goal.
Yeah. And I think one of the big take home points I would say with all of that, Aaron, is in order to grow or in order for anybody to scale, regardless of whether they're profit, nonprofit, or whatever, it can't be done alone. You've got to build a community of people and experts and people that you can delegate to in order to that. And even as long as I've been in practice, I'm still have to remind myself of that because I tend to want to do it all myself, and it just gets you in the weeds really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so our website is www.grocommunity.org, and that's for the organization Grow Community. My freedom is getfreedomva.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Aaron Mallory, LCSW. And yeah, I appreciate you for having me.
I hope to have you back here and just get more updates on everything. Well, again, a big thanks to Aaron for being on the podcast. I will say I was just really enthralled with talking with Aaron and just learning about the things that he's doing, and just his whole demeanor just really told me that he is just honestly a person that is humble, but also making a huge difference in the world, and just a really brilliant person as well. Just some of the ideas he's coming up with and the way he's just approaching being able to help people in the south side of Chicago, particularly people of color, people, Black and brown people that are very much marginalized, not only there, but in other parts of the country. So just kudos to Aaron for all the work that he's doing. And also, before we go, I'd love for you to check out TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, or you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes to find out more about them. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice and just couldn't operate without them. And now they've got a therapy directory feature I just saw that came up, and that's going to be cool as far as being able to make referrals across the various networks that TherapyNotes services. So that's going to be an exciting feature to check out. So be sure and check them out. practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes, and be sure and use that promo code just Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them for 2 months for free. So be sure and check them out. And also be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcast, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of the other numerous places we're located. Do take time to hit that follow button, and hopefully you'll get to hear some good stuff here in the future. But take care, folks. Hope you have a great start to September, and we'll be back with you again for another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.